This week on BSD Now, we're taking a look at a few different tutorials, including running your very own Raspberry Pi web server. Come on, you know you've thought of it. We also have a GhostBSD tutorial and a look at a GitHub project to run Steam Linux on FreeBSD 11, so you'll want to stick around for your place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 154, Myths, Pies, and Features, oh my. Recorded for August 10th, 2016. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you guys with us this week. So we're recording a little bit early. This is another famous doubleheader. We're recording 2 in 1 day. But you'll get to see this episode like it's the real deal for the real week. I'll actually be out this week, and then Alan's gone the following week. But, you know, we've never left anybody hanging. It seems like we always manage to give them a new episode. So you always have new content to look forward to. And we're not going to break that string or that unbroken string of, gosh, what are we going on? 3 years
154. So,
yeah.
The 2 weeks after... the week after I get back from BSD Cam will be our 3-year episode.
That's
ridiculous.
Just amazing. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Good stuff. But anyway, let's get right into this episode here. So we're going to hop right into the headlines. So first up is Ted Uangst, who led off last week's episode, has another good blog post this week. So tell us about what's going on there about broken features which aren't used.
Well, the best thing about broken features is that obviously are not used, or someone would complain that they were broken, right? So yes, in this post, Ted Yu talks about the difficulties of removing features from an operating system. He says, one of the difficulties in removing a feature is identifying all the potential users. A feature here could be a program bundled with the operating system, or a command line option, or just some function in a library. If we remove a feature, users that depend on it will be sad. Unfortunately, absence of evidence is not absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. I've never heard of anyone using ls-p, but it's not impossible that someone does use this. The reason why we want to remove an existing feature can vary. Sometimes it's old code that interferes with maintenance. Sometimes it's near a complete rewrite that can improve performance, but doesn't have this one feature. Or in some cases, the feature in question is really more of a misfeature and probably should be removed. Or it may have security implications where the existence of a feature can be used to facilitate the exploitation of some other vulnerability, and removing the feature will mitigate the exploit. So it says, there's no general test that can be used, but there is one test that works in many cases. Test that the feature actually works. If the feature doesn't work, then compelling evidence that nobody is using it.
Sure.
Because...
or cares enough to complain that it's broken.
Exactly. If it's broken, nobody's using it, and you can safely remove it. You don't need to fix it. You can just remove it. Then he goes on to make some interesting comments about exhaustive unit testing and the push to keep everything working all the time. If you actually do that, then nothing will ever be broken, and then you can never remove anything. If you never break anything to see if anybody complains, then how do you know if it's still being used?
So basically, we want the bit rot because that's the natural pruning mechanism by which we determine when we remove things.
Kind of.
It's bit rotted. Nobody cares about that anymore.
Although basically, it comes down to people don't put the effort into fixing things that they don't use, and so they end up on the chopping block that way.
Yep.
If we have the infinite free time, then yes, we can keep all the features working forever, even if nobody uses them. But that's probably not the best use of our time. And
that's just a lot of wasted effort, especially for something.
Especially when our time is already so limited.
That's right. That's right. Okay, here. So next up in the news round, or not news roundup, the main news here. So first up, we have a Raspberry Pi FreeBSD web server. So if you're looking at a super low power solution to host some web pages, if so, we have a great tutorial for you. So specifically, we have a walkthrough of getting FreeBSD up and running on a Pi, setting up Nginx, OpenNTPD, LibreSSL, and of course all their friends. So the walkthrough is actually really good. It starts off straight off the bat with just how to fetch FreeBSD 11 snapshots for ARM 64, doing the initial setup process that'll basically get you to a bootable FreeBSD system on your Pi. But if you're an extreme noob, you actually don't have to fear. This tutorial is really basic. Matter of fact, it's pretty well written. I thought about giving it to my 13-year-old because he's got a Raspberry Pi he plays with now, and I think this is one within his reach. But the tutorial walks you through setting up usernames, time zones, even making a large temp directory on your new little mini BSD setup. However, the tedious part comes into play during the setup of packages. So the author of this particular tutorial walks us through setting up LibreSSL and various other packages, compiling directly from ports, since LibreSSL isn't the default in FreeBSD. So those are obviously going to take a little bit of time to compile on your humble little Raspberry Pi device. So in that case, you can go make a sandwich, walk the dog, fix the gutters, etc. while you're waiting for those to compile.
He didn't mean any one of those. He meant you would have to do all of those.
Yes, all of them in order. So you got to start your LibreSSL because he wants all the ports to use LibreSSL versus the OpenSSL default. So switch over to all that. See, this is why we should have a TrueOS embedded version at some point. So we'll compile it with LibreSSL packages and have an alternative. Right?
Or you could find one of our other previous tutorials on how to compile packages for your Raspberry Pi on your big AMD 64 machine, and that'll be a bit faster.
That is true.
Although
you could
with just your
that's a lot of work though.
With just your home machine, that's not going to be all that much faster. Well, it'll be faster, just not, compared to me doing it with one of my 32-core machines, it doesn't help as much. But when you're only compiling just the packages you need, while it's quite a bit of setup to set up the Poudriere to be able to do that, do remember that, you're going to need to update the packages on your Raspberry Pi, and then it's already set up. You just fire off the command again and build, and then you have your packages.
That is true. That is true. But when it's all said and done with this tutorial, you'll end up with a secure little web server that you've configured pretty much all by yourself. Of course, now that makes me wonder what the performance is like on something like that. I mean, are you running WordPress on there? Like
that WordPress is probably fine. Your biggest restriction is probably going to be the SD card read and write speed, especially the write speed.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, that would be a little rough. But hey, for our little local box where you want to host a couple of maybe static pages as well, that could be the way to do it. So definitely interesting article. And if you're looking, if you have one, if you're like me, I had a couple of these Pis sitting around for a long time and nothing to do with them because I just didn't have the time, know what to do. This is a really good tutorial. You can get somebody started because A, they're learning something cool, new and embedded. B, they're messing around with BSD and learning that as well. Okay, so before we get to the rest of our stories, we're going to start with our first sponsor this week, which is going to be IX Systems. Website for that, ixsystems.com/BSD Now, where you've heard us talking about IX and all the stories. We've showed you pictures of Alan's gear he's bought. I did the Mini XL unboxing. That was a lot of fun. But you can now get some of that gear for yourself. Of course, it could be for your home or for your business. And they do pretty much everything, all that and everything in between. So if you get in touch with them, they can build you everything from those little FreeNAS Minis down to the Mini XL, which is the 8-port version or the 8-drive version, all the way up to massive systems with a terabyte of memory. You name it, they can build it. They've probably already done it before. So get in touch with these guys, of course, running all the latest and greatest Intel processors, and they're even pretty good about finding the kind of one-offs or the odd ones that you need a specific revision of this to do this. They might be able to find that for you as well. Just got to ask, see what they can work out. And of course, the IX Systems sales engineers actually understand the technology. So when you call up, don't just say, hey, I need this kind of server. Say, no, hey, I'm going to do this. This is my workload. How can we buy a system which best meets that performance requirement and saves us some money, but also puts more bang for the buck where I actually need it? And that's what IX is really, really good at versus just selling you something off the shelf.
Yeah, there's so much tweaking they can do depending on what your workload is and what actual level of performance you require to kind of min-max the best performance you're going to get with minimizing how strained it'll make your budget. And that's one of the things we really liked about them. And last week we were doing maintenance on the Scale Engine rack, and we were looking at our nice brand new machines from IX and then some of our older machines before we knew about IX, and it was like, all the problems those machines have given us and all these new ones just are flawless and they don't we've never had. It's like, oh well, the RAID card we got doesn't. It says on the box it supports FreeBSD, but it only supports FreeBSD 8, not FreeBSD 9, which was current at the time.
Oh, gosh.
And it causes endless headaches. And then it's like, if we had known about IX and just got it from them, they would have given us the right one. It was like, oh, you're using ZFS, you don't want a RAID controller, you want an HBA. So you can save a couple $100 and have a better card that has better drivers and all the and just all the things. And it's just like, why didn't we hear about them before? It's like, yes, we really wish we knew about them in 2009.
Okay, well, definitely you can have that experience too. Go get in touch with them today. And when you talk to the folks at IX, be sure you mention you heard about it here on BSD Now, because they like hearing from you guys. Okay, so next up we have a story about a company, Uber specifically, switching from Postgres back to MySQL. So what happened there? What's going on?
Often we hear stories going the other direction where somebody switches to Postgres because it's that much faster or better or whatever. But in this case, they were using Postgres and had to switch back to MySQL. The Uber's engineering team has switched back to MySQL because for their specific workload in the design of their application, MySQL's InnoDB is giving better performance. Of course, they're not actually just using vanilla MySQL. They're using this system called Schema Lists, which is a sharding system that sits on top of MySQL and spreads their data across multiple servers. But the article goes into details about the problems they were having with the on-disk format used by Postgres and the specific shortcomings that was causing with the way the indexes work and so on. A little bit later in the story, we have a link to a post on the Postgres mailing list where they actually look at some of the specific queries and what was happening and why that doesn't work well on Postgres. But yeah, so they switched to MySQL and they're actually getting better performance. One of their other, in their article, they admit that all their testing was done against the older Postgres 9.2, whereas current is 9.5. But part of that is one of their complaints was actually how hard it is to upgrade Postgres for them. In particular, the Postgres replication system uses the on-disk format of Postgres, which is specific to each version. So if they have their master-slave type setup, you can't just upgrade the master and later upgrade the slave. You have to upgrade them at the same, or you have to stop the master, upgrade it, convert all your data, then restart all your slaves as 9.3s and re-replicate all the data, basically. They say, we started out with Postgres 9.1 and successfully completed the upgrade process to move to Postgres 9.2. However, this process took many hours that we couldn't afford to do that process again. By the time Postgres 9.3 came out, Uber's growth increased our data set substantially, so the upgrade would have been even lengthier. For this reason, our legacy Postgres instances still run Postgres 9.2 to this day, even though the current generally available release is 9.5. And they actually talk about the process they had to go through to upgrade and some of the problems they've had with that. And then more, again, on the on-disk format and the different problems they were having there. And then there's this post from the Postgres mailing list called Why We Lost Uber as a User. And they go on to talk about some of the specific problems and what the queries were and why they didn't work. And they say, the Uber guy is right that InnoDB handles this particular operation better as long as you don't change the primary key, because primary key updates in InnoDB are really slow. This is a common problem case, and we don't actually have an answer to it yet. So Postgres admits that this particular thing is a problem, although a lot of workloads will probably never run into it. The thread then goes on to discuss possibly supporting a pluggable heap storage layer to allow different on-disk formats for different workloads that, so you can choose the one that will work best for you. And anyway, if you're interested in Postgres and so on, the Uber post has a lot of detail from their side, and the Postgres post has a lot of detail from the other side as well. In particular, it looks like it is possible that Postgres could have worked for Uber if they had structured their database slightly differently. But, obviously it's too late for that at this point.
Sure. At this point, it's set up that way. That would be very costly to try and change it. Okay, well, interesting. We'll keep an eye on that. So next up, we have, I think this may be our first GhostBSD tutorial, but we have a nice walkthrough the initial getting started with GhostBSD. So for those who don't know, because we haven't mentioned a whole lot, but GhostBSD provides a nice XFCE or mate desktop out of box and still supports 32-bit installs. So if those of you who have your older hardware you want to keep running, you can do that with GhostBSD. The walkthrough, though, it's in, looks like 4 parts here, but it takes us through the process of grabbing not only the images, but then getting the installer up and running, all via bootable USB stick, etc. So kind of the basics there. But once booted, it shows you what the graphical installer looks like, which is really straightforward and short. That allows you to get all the bits on disk pretty much as quickly as possible, just a couple clicks and you're done. They said the actual installation for them took about 45 minutes, but that was on an old Toshiba NB520. So if you're running on a little more modern hardware, your mileage may be a bit better on that. The author then takes us on a tour through some of GhostBSD's out-of-box bundled applications, which in this case, they're looking at the XFCE desktop and comparing it to similar Linux setups. Lastly, it covered the setup of wireless, but not the way you'd think. They actually showed you how to do it with a WPA supplicant, since they said the GUI tool didn't appear to be working in their particular use case. So yeah, you get a little WPA supplicant tutorial out of it too, which is kind of cool. But all in all, it's a pretty good walkthrough, especially if you've never seen GhostBSD in action before or never seen screenshots of it. They're very informative. So take a look. Maybe this is your next distro you got to mess around with and give a whirl, especially if you have an older 32-bit system that you need to do something with. That could be a cool way to mess around with it. Okay, we got a news roundup to get to, folks, and of course, got some good stories here. We're going to try and go through them a little quicker than typical, but we have some neat ones here. So we're going to get started with Steam on FreeBSD 11 current. So, of course, Steam on FreeBSD, we've heard of people doing that with Wine. I mean, that's probably the way most people have been doing it. But how about running the Linux binaries natively? Well, you're in luck. We have a GitHub project that's been posted which has details on how to get the Linux native client up and running on a FreeBSD 11 current system. So first of all, if you go take a look at the link in the show notes, the project is rather mysterious because the README doesn't have a lot of data on it. It just has instructions that say download this prepackaged steam.txt file, extract, and then run the provided install.sh script.
Yeah, looking at the commitment logs, and a bunch of them have obviously non-English characters in them. I'm assuming the reason for the lack of a README is language barrier.
Yeah, I think somebody could probably help improve that. Submit a pull request, get that fixed. But, I was curious, and because I wanted to do my due diligence for you guys out in the audience, I actually inspected some of the scripts to see what it's doing. So to give you a little background, the installer.sh, which is the first thing they ask you to run, is pretty straightforward, but it does some non-standard FreeBSD things, like it fetches packages, then extracts specific files and libraries from those packages into a new compat Ubuntu directory and doesn't register them with PKG at all. After that, then it goes through a huge list of Debian and Ubuntu packages and also extracts and kind of, just drops all the bits into this compat Ubuntu directory, which is fine. That's the way they're doing it. They're trying to pull the latest Debian since we don't have that in the FreeBSD port stream. But at runtime, the wrapper script then ensures that various Linux compat systems are mounted in the correct location, and then proceeds to run Steam with some LD library flags set, and it creates a user's local share Steam directory in your home directory. So a little funky. I mean, to be honest, it's a tad scary to just run a shell script like that on your system, but this is a really neat proof of concept to see the native Steam running on FreeBSD. So that is kind of cool. So hopefully somebody can take this, get inspired, turn it into a little bit more traditional package, which can be easily removed and cleaned up afterwards, because that would be the one downside to running this that I see right now. However, I think people should give that a whirl, and if they have good luck with it, write us. Let us know how it works.
Well, yeah,
I think a lot of people would be interested in seeing Steam.
I don't think this would be very hard to make a package out of, because you would just basically do the content of that install.sh into a stageder in the port, and then make the plist, and then you'd get a single file package that would just splat it all into that directory, but registered so that when you package delete it, it cleans it all up.
That's right. That's right. So hopefully, like I said, somebody will do that, use this as the proof of concept, and then now turn it into a package. So even if it packages everything in one big file and splats it into compat Ubuntu, I'm okay with that. Just as long as it's a package where I can clean up after myself would be.
If it's all in one directory, you can clean up with RM. But yeah, packages are clean.
True. Yes, for sure. So anyway, take a look. And if anyone has any luck with that, write us. We'd be curious to hear what your user experience is like with that.
Yeah. I didn't think it would be quite this easy. in particular.
Yeah, it
I thought
doesn't look that
the
bad.
kernel
It's mostly just the mechanics of getting
right.
the
I
bits
I
on
was
the disk.
figured the kernel would be missing something to actually run, but no, they're actually playing Counter-Strike Go here. So
Well, the question is, I guess, what other games
Right.
work and don't work, right? I bet you will run into, oh, I'm still missing this kernel.
well, there's not that
closest
many,
call, whatever
and
you run.
the graphics work is going to fill out the rest of those by the sounds of it. So
That is true. That is true. So if you run it on TrueOS, maybe you'll have even better luck. We'll see. Anyway, all right. Well, moving on. So how to run Enlightenment on OpenBSD. So are you an Enlightenment fan? So of course, be honest. We know there's quite a few of you out there. So if so, we actually have a tutorial for you today that talks about how to run Enlightenment on OpenBSD. The process is actually pretty easy, but some steps might be overlooked if you're new to OpenBSD or you just don't know how to tune or compile things on your own. And getting started, it starts off with adjusting some sysctls that give you a little better tuning for an Enlightenment-based desktop. I think it's changing some of the memory stuff.
yeah, shared memory
again.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Although
shared
the tutorial
memory.
uses a weird font. It looks really
It does.
bad
It's
on my
very
screen.
difficult to read.
I'm sure it
Same
looks
here.
fine on their
Same
screen.
Right. But next, then they install a bunch of packages from the OpenBSD package repo, which will allow them to build Enlightenment from source. But after that, they'll walk you through downloading and installing EFL from GitHub, and they provide all the nice autogen and gmake commands for you, so you don't have to research and figure out what magic combination of flags makes that all go. Hopefully, just copy and paste, and you're good to go there. And then lastly, they do the same for the Enlightenment project itself, and ta-da, pretty much you're all set up and ready to go on your OpenBSD system. I mean, if you do this right and you got good hardware, maybe it's only going to be 5 to 10 minutes, and you're up and running on an Enlightenment desktop. So definitely check that out and give it a whirl. Hopefully that works well for you. Okay, so our next sponsor this week, we're going to do DigitalOcean. I'll let you intro them today, Alan. I'm talking a lot. So.
Yeah. So as we've talked about plenty of times before, and as we saw with the feedback from a bunch of users last week and so on, that people are out there using this because you can rent a virtual machine to run FreeBSD on for as little as $5 a month. And now that they have support for ZFS as well, you're probably more interested in a slightly bigger one with more RAM. But then you're thinking, well, ZFS, but even the $20 one only comes with 40 gigs of space. It's like, well, now they have their block storage thing where you can rent whatever amount of space you want between 1 gigabyte and 16 terabytes at a nice low monthly rate. And you only have to rent as much as you need right now. And because it's ZFS, it means you can just add more space later and then, ZFS online minus E, and boom, you're using all that space now.
There it shows up.
And you have the extra space. And you can just keep doing that. Every time your ZFS runs low on space, just give it rent more space, and it's all that easy. And then even if you want to go down, you could create a new smaller one, ZFS send, and from the old one to the new one, and then stop paying for the old one, and you can shrink too. That's the nice thing about ZFS with send receive. And then they have all the other features that you might be after now. They really mature platform with support for floating IP addresses, so you can move a static IP address between virtual machines on the fly so that you can maintain high availability across upgrades or whatever else you might need to do. Team accounts, how often are you doing anything by yourself nowadays? You usually have a couple of the people. Well, sharing passwords is bad. Team accounts, let each person have separate password. They even got it now so that your one account, you can separate your personal DigitalOcean stuff from your work DigitalOcean stuff, and you can be a member of 10 different teams and have access to a bunch of other people's DigitalOcean stuff. It makes it really easy to work with and not need to balance having too many different accounts and so on.
Even sharing your password for Netflix gets you in trouble in the States. So don't share passwords. But that's awesome. And it just shows their commitment to being a business friendly.
And we haven't even mentioned the API in the last couple of weeks. They have this amazing API so you can do all of this stuff without even having to go use their website. But if you do use the website, it's very, very nice control panel. It's very quick and concise, but it has all the buttons. It's easy to use and very fast.
Mm-hmm. Definitely good stuff. So give them a whirl today, folks. And if you talk to anyone over there, be sure to mention that you heard about it here at BSD Now. And of course, the coupon code FreeBSD Now is what you want to use for your $10 credit, so that you can try it out. I mean, that's 2 months of their lower NVM.
Or 1 month of lower NVM and lots of extra disk storage if you need it.
Very cool. Okay, well, let's move on. So we have myths about FreeBSD. Over on the FreeBSD wiki, we now have a new myths page, which we've never talked about on the show before, but I found kind of fascinating. Got a chuckle on.
Yeah, so there's a myths page that's been a part of the official website for a long time, but it's kind of showing its age. It's like myths about FreeBSD from the early 2000s or from the .com era. So the bunch of people have started a wiki version of the page to try to whip this into shape so they can republish the one on the website and actually have it be more modern. And so that's where we need your help. Especially, I know a lot of people watching the show now originally were Linux users or didn't know that much about BSD and probably heard a bunch of these myths and now have experienced BSD firsthand and know what's not true. So, especially our audience would be very good at answering what are some of the myths you heard that you've since learned are not true, and let's get them added to this page.
Well, I'd say the first one they had on that list was the one I've heard all the time is, FreeBSD is only for servers, not for desktops, which they did offer a good rebuttal in here. Or what they're talking about is that it does offer support for desktops. They mentioned the sound system. Of course, they mentioned projects like PCBSD. So it was good to see that one kind of just dealt with right out of the gate. Another prevalent one, though, is the FreeBSD has a closed development model, which is bogus, but easily refuted. And they have a good answer here. They said FreeBSD has over 400 developers around the world who have commit access to the repository.
That's more than Linux.
Many of these are...
Linux has like 4.
Right. They said many of these are willing to commit patches from third parties. If you want to get an idea of the number of patches that have been committed on behalf of other developers, search for submitted by in the commit logs. As of the time of this writing, this is just under 20,000, or about 10% of all commits. After having a few patches accepted, regular contributors are usually encouraged to apply for commit access. So definitely not closed.
There's also a contributors page, which is just a giant list of people who've made significant contributions but never got a commit bit.
That is true. That is true. So another one that we still hear, although it's a little less and less now, was the FreeBSD makes me compile everything from source. So if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that we've talked a lot about package and how that's kind of made that irrelevant in recent years. However, the option to compile yourself from source does still exist, but most users will probably not really ever find this necessary, especially for typical
you get a certain amount of comfort from knowing that's there if you want it.
Yes. You have the power and the freedom. We're not taking things away from you. We're just giving you better tools and options.
I love this. All the good bits of FreeBSD came from Solaris. It's like, well, dtrace and ZFS did, but somebody did up the math, and it turns out that of the code that is considered FreeBSD, ZFS and dtrace put together account for 0.4% of FreeBSD. It's arguably some of the best 0.4% of FreeBSD, but still.
Sure. Okay, yeah. So, I mean, all in all, really good list, some interesting ones. And, of course, you guys out in the audience, if you've come from a Linux background and you've been listening for a while, maybe you should go contribute to that and send your suggestions in. That sounds good. All right, so what's this next one we have here about a KDE 5? I think we teased it last week.
So this is a little script called Area 51 Packages, which will actually download and install KDE 5 from the Area 51 repo run by Steve Wills of the Xorg team. So this creates the area51.conf and puts in the URL and sets it to priority 2. Then disables the FreeBSD package repo, installs Xorg from it stores Xorg and KDE 5 from the Area 51 repo, then re-enables the FreeBSD repo and runs start KDE for you.
Interesting.
So yeah, if you just slap this down on a new system or a system where you're okay with doing this, it will install KDE 5 and let you try it out.
Yeah, that's cool. I know a lot of people have been asking for a long time, of us anyway, when's KDE 5 coming? Well, here you go. Try it out. The sooner you can get them feedback on it working and they can finish up any last bugs, hopefully the sooner it lands in the port tree for everyone. So definitely get in touch with those folks. Okay, so time for Beastie Bits this week, folks. So first up, we have NetBSD had a bunch of machines out at the Open Source Conference 2016 out in Kyoto. So Alan, you'll have to narrate some of those since I can't see your screen here.
Well, I didn't pull up all the pictures, but they have quite a bit of different stuff. First, they had some talks where they have the slides here about NetBSD on the Luna 68K and doing sound and stuff with it. That was interesting. And then... that's PSG tunes on the NetBSD Luna 68K. They said the Luna has a Z80 subprocessor and the YM2149 sound chip, and they porting PSG Z80 sound driver to the PC 6001 on the thing and playing music. They also had a NEC data recorder that they were using to play music. They had RetroBSD and LightBSD. They had LightBSD on a chipkit Wi-Fi, RetroBSD on a PIC32, FreeBSD on a Raspberry Pi B, using powering an LCD showing the load average. That's cool. NetBSD on a Banana Pi, RasBSD on a BeagleBone Black, which is FreeBSD 11, and that had an LED showing the load average and USB Ethernet, and then NetBSD on a Raspberry Pi 2 with running distcc to distributed compiling. Cool. That's interesting.
So do they have a little cluster like 16 of those duct taped together or something?
They also had some astronomical instrumentation using BSD, which is cool. Some other stuff, Raspberry Pi 0, 1, 2, and 3, all running NetBSD. A Sharp Netwalker, a Sharp Zarus, a Sharp W03, and a NEC Sigmatron, or Sigmarion. Something like that. They also had the NetBSD tourist guide of Kyoto, which is cool, and their BSD user groups flyer and a bunch of other pictures. So if you're interested in the pictures, definitely check out the link.
That's cool. That is cool. Okay, well, moving on, we have how to install HTOP on PFsense. Looks like it's just a quick one, how to use the package command to load it up on your box. Doesn't look all that difficult. Package install HTOP, and there you go.
So I remember trying to do this on older PFSense that didn't like package or didn't. So I think it wasn't using package yet or something. I forget.
No, at the time it wasn't.
And so it was, and because the whole file system was read only or whatever, so it was like manually extracting the tar file in like var tmp. And doing some faffing about to be able to run the command and have it still be there the next time. I think it was just nload or something I wanted to run, or rping or something. I forget what I was trying to do on this older PFSense, and it was difficult. But now, boom, you can just install packages and it's good to go. That's awesome.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, this makes it almost too easy. It's kind of like one line, done. I think that they spent more time talking about how to SSH into the box than actually do the installation. But
that's why it's in the roundup.
Good stuff.
And then we have another story here from Camille, who's his first ever patch for Chromium to make it run on NetBSD, and it's committed up source into Chromium.
Okay, very cool. Very cool. And then we have a charm bug. It looks like August 24th is going to be having an Adventures in Hardened BSD talk. So let's see, where's Charmbug located? Which state's that in again?
It's in Maryland.
That's in Maryland. Okay, very cool. So it looks like Sean Webb's going to be presenting there. Yeah, it's at the University Center in Aberdeen, Maryland. So take a look at that. It's gathering it. They're gathering at the Green Turtle there, which I assume is
pub,
kind of pub or eatery of some type. Looks good though. Okay, so before we get into feedback and questions from you guys out in the audience, first up we have a Tarsnap this week, which of course the website for that, tarsnap.com/BSD Now, where you can go right now, get signed up, and start doing your backups safely, securely, offsite, in a fully encrypted manner, which is the only way you should be doing backups, especially to the cloud, because you don't own that data. It's gone. Once you put it up there, it don't go away.
With the cloud, you have no way to ensure your data gets erased. Because the whole point of the cloud is that they keep many replicas of it so that if something breaks, it's not gone. But it means that a delete can never ensure that it's actually deleted from every place where it ended up in the cloud. So
who knows how many tape backups it's on, or other cold storage? Who knows?
Exactly. And so encrypting it and then destroying the key is the only way to ensure that it's actually never readable. And so that's what you need to do.
Good stuff. So definitely go get signed up today, create an account. You can grab the source code, compile it yourself if you would like, if you're really paranoid. Otherwise, you can probably go to your favorite package system of choice and just package add or package install Tarsnap, and away you go. So we wish you good luck with that, and take our advice. Start doing your backups right away before it's too late. Okay, so first up in the feedback and questions this week, we have Emmanuel writes in saying, "Hey guys, not sure if it's worth mentioning, but I've recently discovered GoTTY or Gotti, which allows you to share any CLI output in real time via the web. Binding it to a TMUX session, for instance, allows you to demonstrate something to a large audience, and it's perfect for remote sessions or troubleshooting. It's written in Go, and I've created a FreeBSD port of it already at www.gotti." That is really cool. I had never heard of that, so I wanted to include that because I thought
that would be very useful for teaching a class or so on. It's like having the SSH output up on the screen is the font's never big enough while it's still usable. But if you can give everybody a URL and then go to and they can all see it on their screen in a readable font without having to make the font so big that it won't fit on the the 1024 by 768 projector or whatever. I think that would be very useful for especially when you're teaching classes that involve anything at the console.
Well, the cool thing about this is, though, it's two-way. You can actually type in commands in your web browser, and if you're doing like a shared TMUX, you can do it for teaching as well. Like, okay, watch what I'm going to do here, and then give the other person, tell them, okay, go ahead and type this in now. And
when teaching one-on-one, I've used the watch command on FreeBSD, which allows you to watch another TTY, or optionally with a certain flag also have write access to it. So I'd have them log in, and then I'd hijack into their session and watch them doing it, and they'd be like, no, do it like this, or whatever. But yeah, this seems very interesting.
Yeah, definitely interesting. So it's neat to see. Thanks for making a port and getting that pushed in there. Hopefully more people will give that a whirl. Okay, next up, I'll let you read Joe here,
so
I guess.
Joe says, "Hey guys, first time, long time, etc., etc. I've recently replaced a laptop that was my daily driver for a couple of years. I was looking at installing PCBSD and FreeBSD proper on it in the past, but the dreaded phrase came up, Nvidia Optimus. His new laptop, a Dell XPS, the old one is a Dell XPS 15 from 2012, is very competent at running PCBSD on it, and I tested it. I have the perfect graphics setup, the HDMI port, and LVDS run off the Intel GPU, and possibly the DisplayPort, but really, who uses DisplayPort? I use
DisplayPort.
Everything.
That's what you need.
Everything will use it now. The new video card I bought just has 4 DisplayPorts and nothing else.
Yeah, there you go. See, mine's a 3 DisplayPort, and I use it to drive these 2 4K monitors. It's nice.
But the big issue comes with heat in the battery, and even though it's rarely not plugged into the wall, the battery is still a concern. The BIOS does not allow me to disable either graphics chip. So he's using the Intel, but the Nvidia is sitting there burning up some of his battery. We had a script that we talked about once, like a year ago.
Oh, yeah, it was on the optimizing FreeBSD for laptops. It's up on the wiki somewhere, where it was a script you could run which set some ACPI.
It does like a PCI command to power off the NVIDIA.
Yeah. I don't know if it would apply in this case, but it's probably at least enough of a start that you could figure it out the rest of the way.
So yeah, he says, so my question is it possible to disable a device in software? There's 2 different things for that. There's one that actually like making it go away or whatever, and the other one is there's a sysctl to not power devices where FreeBSD doesn't have a driver for it. And if you just don't load the NVIDIA driver, that might apply, and you might be able to, although in the case of the Optimus type setup, it's usually that it picks one and hides the other one to not confuse your OS, and then so the OS doesn't have that level of control. But yeah, search the wiki for the battery life article. So wiki.freebsd.org, and find the one that's about laptop battery life. And I think there's a script in there for disabling the NVIDIA card via some PCI hackery. And that might help.
There was some, you send a special code to this and it does something and then it turns off. It was a little weird, but it did work. I just don't remember what model laptop that was for. I want to say it was like one of the Lenovo's. But anyway, hopefully that at least points you in the right direction.
Yes, so he says thanks for everything you do. He's a loyal viewer, and he's very glad to see the show.
Okay. Well, I'll let you take the next one here because it's about ZFS send and receive, man.
So this is from Alan, spelled differently than me, but anyway. This is hello, Alan and Chris. This is I've been watching the show for a while. I became aware of ZFS when Apple released a read-only version about a decade ago. Was it actually that long? I guess it would have been. FreeBSD seemed to be the best solution for my home project, and more on that later, and I haven't looked back. I built my home NAS box on a box that I spec'd years ago. I knew my research was valid when the IX Systems FreeNAS Mini had nearly the same hardware. My NAS stores 15,000 raw pictures, multi-hosted WAN accessible server, or sorry, multi-homed, I think you meant, and serves as his Plex home theater PC. I have a nearly lights out OTA recording system that downloads and moves the recompressed shows to the Plex server. The only thing I have to do occasionally is delete the recorded shows on his Tableau. I don't know what that is, but anyway. I'm currently using rsync to back up the server contents to 2 rotating backup sets. Now to my problem. I've been experimenting with replacing rsync with ZFS send and receive. I can't seem to find the right combination of options on the send and or receive command or parameters of ZFS itself. The problem is that some of the snapshots during a ZFS send -r, capital I, get resent even though a list of snapshots on the receive side so the snapshots already exist. I spent countless hours researching this problem and I can't seem to find any specific solutions. The handbook is very good as a spec guide but is limited as a user guide. So ZFS send is a one-way protocol. ZFS send allows you to send to even a file that maybe you put on tape and aren't going to ZFS receive until 5 years later. So there's no interaction between the two, right? ZFS send just writes to a pipe. So when you say, give me everything from this snapshot to this snapshot, it does send everything. Now, on the receive side, it knows it already has that snapshot, so it just skips that data and fast forwards through it. But you're still sending it over the network, which is a waste. So you should only send the snapshots you need. Now, that requires you to manually do some stuff. So that's why there's scripts. Like there's one in sysutils called ZXfer, and it basically runs ZFS list and finds the list of all the snapshots on your sending machine. SSHs over to, or not SSH if you're just doing 2 pools on the same machine, and runs ZFS list on the destination and figures out which snapshots are there. And then says, okay, I need to send everything from here to here, and it will avoid the overlap. But you need is a smarter script. And basically looking at ZFS list on the other side, figure out what the newest snapshot it has, and increment from that to the newest one on the sending side. And yes, the ZXfer script will do that for you. You're not doing it wrong. That's how it's supposed to work. It's a limitation of ZFS send, but it's there on purpose because it allows you to do things like ZFS send to a tape backup and restore that 5 years from now and ZFS receive it. And so that it's why it's unidirectional. It only sends in one direction. It doesn't expect any answer back from ZFS receive because, whether it's just I ZFS send to a file and then transfer it manually to be able to resume it before ZFS supported resume itself, or if I'm throwing it to a tape, or if I'm just storing my ZFS send as a file on a UFS or on some other file system on a machine that doesn't support ZFS, or whatever different things you'll be doing. But anyway, if you use ZXfer, it will solve your problem. And he says, is there a complete guide with real-world examples and best practices for ZFS send receive as an unmounted backup system? FreeBSD Mastery Advanced ZFS, the book, has some more detail on replication and how to do a couple of different things. The unmounted thing is slightly weird in ZFS because it kind of really, really wants to mount everything. But ZXfer has the option to set properties before you receive, so you can actually, as part of transferring, have it, can mount equals no on the other side, so it never gets mounted.
Okay.
I hope to have an even better solution to that someday, but free time has been a problem.
Time. It's always time. Next up, we have Micah writes, and he says, thanks for the show. Last week, a listener, Michael, wrote in about GPU pass-through and mentioned having a ton of photos in Adobe Lightroom. While you can certainly run Lightroom in a VM, the photographic tools available in the free software community are very valuable now. This wasn't always the case. He says there's several raw editors. You have Darktable, Raw Therapy, PhotoFlow, Filmulator, and several pixel editors such as GIMP and Krita, and of course, numerous management and organization applications like Digicam, Showell, Geeky, and various other great utilities like Hugin, Gmic, Luminance HDR, HDR Merge, etc. He said there's a community forming around free software for photographers at pixels.us and then a forum at the same site.
Pixls.us.
Yes. Yes. Well, he said, we're pretty OS agnostic. Many of the tools listed above run on Windows and Mac, and a quick search reveals that many are in FreeBSD port straight. Unfortunately, there's no way to carry edits from Lightroom to another application, but one can always change going forward. He said, we're a friendly bunch in the forum, lots of smart people, developers of apps, and all around good time. So please join us. We'd love to have you part of the community. Yeah, I know that's always been one particular niche that's hard to cater to, but as he mentions, the open source tools are getting better. And to the point of where now you can pretty much do all this.
Eventually you get this Venn diagram of a couple of people that like taking photos but are also programmers, and the problem gets solved.
That's right.
As with open source, it almost always comes down to how, somebody with the right skills having the right itch, and then things happen.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So check it out. That's good. Thanks for writing in. We appreciate you sending us the info.
Right. So Rob Roy writes in and says, good day, Chris and Alan. I've split my question into a quick section and a detailed edition so that you don't have to read the whole thing on the show. Thank you very much. That was very helpful. Says,
yes.
So if stuck with an 8 drives connected to an LSI 92688i, which is a hardware RAID controller, not an HBA, which option is more likely to keep data safe and available? A, running ZFS with RAID Z2 on 8 LSI RAID 0 virtual disks, or B, using UFS on 1 LSI RAID 6 virtual disk. Your answer is ZFS, and you can do the 8 RAID 0 disks. The only downside to that is when one of those disks dies and you replace it, you have to use the LSI command line utility to recreate a new RAID 0 on that disk before you can use it and Zeep will replace. Depending on the hardware, the LSI does have a tool, but some other RAID controllers, maybe they don't have a tool for FreeBSD. So it means you have to reboot and go into the RAID BIOS and create that RAID 0 disk and then back into FreeBSD just to do Zeep will replace. Whereas if on an HBA, this is an all-in operation you could do with never rebooting. So as long as you have the LSI command line utilities, although some of them are better than others, like MPS util or whatever is a lot nicer than Mega CLI is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. That command syntax makes no sense. It's horrible. But anyway, so yes, the RAID zeros will work. Yes, the key thing to do is not create an LSI RAID 6 and then give that to ZFS as one disk, because then ZFS can't do anything for you. Mm-hmm. It'll run its checksums and then be like, that block is wrong, and then it's like, but I don't have a backup copy, so you're screwed. So yes, the RAID zeros will work. It just has the downside of when a disk fails, it might come down to you having to reboot to be able to replace the disk. And while that is annoying, depending on your setup, it's not necessarily the end of the world.
Sure.
If that becomes that big of a deal to you, you can just buy the right RAID card probably. But for a regular setup, that's probably fine. I have setups like that because my very first ZFS server, I didn't know that I didn't want RAID. And I have a very similar problem in that one. UFS with the LSI RAID 6 is a better option than trying to do ZFS on the RAID 6. But, UFS has no checksums, so that has a downside.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for writing in, Rob Roy. So we're going to go ahead and close out the show now, guys. So first up, we got to remind you, send everything to feedback@bsdnow.tv.
Yes.
Like if you send it anywhere else, we probably won't see it. I mean, I might see Twitter every now and then, but don't rely on that.
Yep.
Send us email, because that way we'll get it. Me, Alan, and JT will see it as well. And of course, don't just send comments. We appreciate that. But if you have questions, send those as well. Or if you have show ideas or topics, or better yet, you find stories in your daily travels around the internet, and you're like, oh, this is BSD related. This is cool. Even, we've had some stories in the past that are semi-BSD related, but still very interesting because they touch on it in some way. Send that over so we can make sure we get included on a future episode. Of course, interviews.
Yes, interviews.
If you know somebody who needs to come on here for an interview, or you are that person, also contact us at feedback@bsdnow.tv so we can get you put in the queue and do that for a future episode.
We're dying for interviews over here, and we've got a couple of suggestions, but nobody volunteering and nobody prodding people they know to actually volunteer.
Dates. Yeah.
A couple of the suggestions is like, well, yes, we'd like to interview that person. Or a couple of them, it's like, we have already interviewed that person before, right? It's like, yes, we've interviewed Rick, but yes, we'll have to try to reach out and get him again. But It works much better if you can get them to volunteer.
That is true. They'll be more motivated that way.
We've already tried begging, so we need you, as their friends or acquaintances, to prod them with pointy sticks.
That's right. That's right. Or just lock them out of their box if you're the system in the company or something. Like, you can get your key back as soon as you do your interview. So that'll work too. But anyway, send that all over to feedback@bsdnow.tv so we can get it scheduled for a future episode. And we'll look forward to having another great episode this time next week.